The first alarm sounded too late. By the time the colony realized something was wrong, 3 outlying listening posts had already gone silent. No distress calls, no debris fields, just empty space where ships and stations had been moments before. The system was supposed to be safe, far from trade lanes, far from borders, protected by treaties and distance. That was why the research colony had been built there in the first place. Now, the stars around it felt wrong. Inside the command dome, emergency lights painted the walls in red. Officers shouted over one another as sensor feeds flickered in and out. Every long-range scan returned the same impossible result. Enemy contacts without clear signatures. Weapons fire without known energy patterns. Losses without wreckage. Ships were not being destroyed. They were being erased. A senior analyst finally spoke, her voice unsteady. She had replayed the data a dozen times already. Whatever is attacking us is ignoring shields, she said. And it is learning. Each strike is faster, cleaner. Another explosion rocked the colony's outer ring. A research habitat vanished in a white flash, its signal cutting off mid-scream. Silence followed. That silence spread fear faster than panic ever could. The colony governor stared at the central holomap. Defensive platforms were down to 30%. Evacuation lanes were collapsing one by one. Reinforcements from nearby systems were days away, if they came at all. The governor knew the truth. None of them wanted to say it out loud. They were running out of time. A junior communications officer hesitated before speaking. His hands trembled over the console. There is one option left, he said quietly. Every head turned toward him. The officer swallowed. An emergency protocol. Old. Pre-council. The room went still. No, someone said immediately. That code was outlawed. It was sealed for a reason, another added. We do not invoke that. The officer's voice dropped. If we do nothing, we will all be dead in less than an hour. The governor closed her eyes. She already knew which protocol he meant. The forbidden one. The SOS that did not summon aid. It summoned Deathworlders. Records described humans as survivors of impossible gravity, toxic atmospheres, endless war. A species that adapted not by avoiding danger, but by enduring it until danger broke first. They were brilliant, violent, loyal beyond reason, and once unleashed, impossible to control. The Council had erased most of their history. Officially, humanity had withdrawn from galactic affairs centuries ago. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. The galaxy had asked humans for help once before, and the price had nearly shattered civilization. Another impact shook the station. Power grids failed across 3 sectors. The holomap flickered, then stabilized, showing enemy signatures closing fast. The governor opened her eyes. How long? She asked, before total collapse. The analyst did not hesitate. 27 minutes. The governor stood. Her voice was calm, but heavy. Prepare the signal. Several officers protested. Some turned away. One removed his headset as if he did not want to hear what came next. The communications officer's fingers hovered over the final authorization key. Once sent, he said, it cannot be recalled. I know, the governor replied. Send it anyway. The ancient code activated. A pulse older than modern hyperspace technology surged into the void, broadcast across hidden frequencies most species no longer monitored. The SOS did not say please. It did not say help. It said only one thing. We are dying. For a long moment, nothing happened. Enemy ships continued their advance. Defensive fire grew weaker. Escape pods launched blindly into space, hoping for miracles. Then the sensors screamed. Every display spiked at once. Energy readings shot beyond known scales. Gravitational distortions rippled across the system like waves through water. The enemy fleet hesitated. So did everyone else. What is that? Someone whispered. The analyst stared at her screen, color draining from her face. Something is entering the system. Multiple points. No, not multiple. She zoomed out. It's one event, she said. But it's unfolding. Space itself began to bend. Stars stretched into lines. Light warped around an expanding void, as if reality were being pulled open by sheer force. The enemy ships fired immediately. Their weapons vanished into the distortion, swallowed without impact. Then the first shape emerged. It was massive, dark, scarred. A warship unlike anything in Council records. Hull plating layered thick like armor grown over centuries. Weapon ports lined its sides, silent but unmistakable. Engines burned with a steady, controlled fury that spoke of power restrained, not lacking. More shapes followed. Dozens. Hundreds. No fanfare. No broadcast demands. No warning shots. The fleet formed precise ranks, moving with the confidence of something that had done this before, many times. A single transmission cut through every channel, calm and human simple. "This is the Terran War fleet," the voice said. "Emergency signal received." There was a pause, just long enough to breathe. Then the final words landed like a verdict. "Stand by. We are assuming control." Across the system, enemy ships froze in confusion. And for the first time since the attack began, fear changed sides. The moment the Terran War fleet finished forming ranks, the battle stopped being random. Enemy ships that had swarmed like predators moments before now drifted, uncertain, as if their commanders could not decide whether to attack or flee. The human fleet did not rush. It did not spread out. It held position with perfect discipline, engines burning steady, weapons still silent. That silence was not mercy. It was an assessment. Inside the colony's command dome, every alien officer felt it. The pressure, the sense of being measured by something older and far more experienced than themselves. The communications board lit up with requests, council channels, civilian relays, even encrypted military lines long thought abandoned. Everyone wanted answers. None came. Instead, the human ships began deploying drones. Small, angular craft streamed outward in clean lines, slipping past wreckage, scanning debris fields, mapping enemy formations in seconds. "They're not reacting," an analyst whispered. "They're studying." The governor watched the holomap update in real time. Enemy weak points appeared as glowing overlays. Shield harmonics, engine lag zones, command ship markers. Human tactical awareness was not aggressive. It was absolute. Far from the battlefield, in the Galactic Council core, alarms echoed through marble halls and crystal spires. Ancient observers, species who had not felt fear in centuries, leaned forward as the same sensor data arrived. The names spread quickly, spoken in disbelief. Terrans. Some laughed nervously, insisting it had to be an error. Humanity had withdrawn. Humanity had gone silent. Humanity has become a legend. Others did not laugh at all. They opened sealed archives. Records long buried beneath diplomatic lies and classified erasures flickered to life. Grainy footage. Incomplete translations. Star maps marked with red warnings instead of names. One council historian, older than most civilizations, spoke in a voice rough with memory. "We told ourselves humans were dangerous because they were violent," she said. That was a lie. Screens shifted to old battle logs. Humans were dangerous because they finished wars. Back in the threatened system, the enemy fleet finally committed to action. Their commanders, driven by pride or desperation, ordered a full assault. Energy lances burned toward the Terran line in blinding waves. The human ships did not scatter. They advanced. Not fast, not slow, relentless. The first Terran battleship raised its forward arrays. A low-frequency hum rolled through space, felt even through hulls and shields. Then it fired. There was no explosion. The enemy cruiser simply ceased. Its structure collapsed inward, compressed by forces its physics could not resist. A moment later, what remained unraveled into harmless dust. The humans had not breached shields. They had rewritten them. Enemy return fire struck the Terran formation. Shields flared. Armor scorched. But the ships held. They adjusted, adapted, rebalanced, each hit making the next one less effective. "They're learning from the damage," an alien weapons officer said in awe. In real time, human destroyers peeled off, not to chase kills, but to intercept incoming fire aimed at the colony. They placed themselves between civilians and annihilation without hesitation. One human ship took a direct hit meant for a medical habitat. It did not retreat. It burned, vented the atmosphere, and stayed in position until evacuation was complete. Then it fell back in silence. No distress call. No complaints. The enemy fleet began to break. Ships turned away, engines flaring, trying to escape the system. That was when the humans spoke again. "This is a containment action," the Terran commander said calmly. "All hostile vessels attempting withdrawal will be intercepted." As if on cue, gravity wells bloomed across the system. Invisible nets snapped shut. Hyperdrives failed. Warp fields collapsed. There would be no running. Ground reports flooded in from the colony's surface. Human dropships punched through the atmosphere like meteors, landing near civilian zones already under attack. Their soldiers moved with brutal efficiency, weapons precise, formations tight. They did not shout. They did not celebrate. They cleared the corridors, secured shelters, extracted the wounded. Alien civilians watched in shock as human soldiers, faces hidden behind dark visors, knelt beside injured non-humans, lifting them as carefully as their own. One alien child reached out, touching a human's armored hand. The human paused, then gently closed his fingers around the small claw. The galaxy was watching. On the council feeds, panic turned into something else. Shame. Realization. The historians were right. Humanity had not been feared because they were cruel. They were feared because once they committed, they did not stop until the threat was gone, root and cause alike. The enemy command ship finally broadcast a message. Their signal trembled with static and fear. "We will negotiate," the enemy leaders said. "We were unaware." The human reply cut in instantly. "Negotiation comes after civilians are safe." The channel closed. The Terran fleet shifted formation again. Larger ships moved forward. Smaller ones locked into escort patterns. Energy readings climbed, not wild, but deliberate. The governor felt it deep in her bones. This was not humanity escalating in anger. This was humanity unlocking the next layer. An analyst stared at incoming scans, voice barely audible. "They're deploying weapons I don't recognize. Power signatures are constrained, like they're holding something back." The governor whispered, "Why would they do that?" The analyst swallowed. "Because this isn't the real response." Far beyond the system's edge, deeper sensors detected movement, signals that had not been there before. More Terran fleets. Not arriving. Waiting. The humans were not here to fight a battle. They were here to end a problem. And as the enemy fleet realized escape was impossible, as council members stared at truths they had buried for centuries, one fact became impossible to deny. Sending that SOS had saved the colony. But it had also reminded the galaxy of something it had desperately tried to forget. When humans answered a call for help, they did not arrive alone. They arrived with consequences. The enemy fleet realized the truth too late. Their commanders had believed the Terrans were simply another force, stronger than expected, yes, but bound by the same rules of engagement. Firepower. Attrition. Retreat when losses grew too high. They were wrong. The Terran War fleet did not fight wars the way the galaxy understood them. They reshaped them. As the human ships advanced, space around them began to behave strangely. Enemy targeting solutions failed. Guidance systems lagged. Even visual sensors reported slight delays, as if reality itself needed extra time to catch up to human movement. "They're not jamming us," an enemy tactician hissed. "They're interfering with causality." That report never reached command. A human strike group slipped through the enemy formation without firing a single shot. Their presence alone disrupted power grids, forced shield recalibrations, and caused reactors to auto-scram to prevent overload. Panic spread. Orders conflicted. Fleets collided. Defensive lines folded inward as ships tried to avoid threats they could not fully perceive. Inside the Terran flagship, the bridge was quiet. Human officers stood at their stations, faces calm, voices low. Every movement had purpose. Every command carried weight. The Terran fleet commander watched the battlefield as if reading a finished book. "Phase 3, she said. "Begin isolation." Across the system, the humans acted as one. Heavy cruisers anchored themselves along key gravitational junctions, projecting fields that severed the enemy fleet into fragments. Squadrons were cut off from support, from command, from each other. The enemy had built their strength on numbers. Humanity dismantled them with geometry. One enemy battle group attempted a concentrated push, pouring everything they had into a single breakthrough. Energy beams overlapped. Missile swarms burned like artificial suns. The Terran line absorbed it. Human shields did not flare brightly. They darkened, layers folding inward, dispersing force not outward but downward, bleeding energy into controlled sinks. Armor cracked. Hull plating scarred. The ships did not slow. Damage within acceptable parameters, a Terran officer reported. The fleet commander nodded. Proceed. The human counterattack did not come as a wave. It came as a decision. Thousands of precise strikes activated simultaneously. Not enough to destroy everything, but enough to cripple engines, disable weapons, and sever command vessels from escorts. Enemy ships drifted, alive but helpless. The message was clear. Humanity was not here to slaughter. They were here to dominate the fight so completely that resistance became meaningless. On the colony's surface, the ground war intensified. Enemy forces, now cut off from orbital support, pushed harder, hoping to take hostages or secure leverage. They met human infantry. The difference was immediate. Human soldiers did not advance recklessly. They moved like a tightening vice, methodical, coordinated, devastating. Drones mapped corridors in seconds. Fire teams adapted to alien weapons without pause, adjusting tactics on the fly. An enemy heavy unit charged a civilian shelter, armor thick, weapons roaring. A single human squad stepped into its path. They did not break formation. One soldier planted his feet, braced, and deployed a compact device into the ground. The floor hummed. Gravity spiked. The enemy unit collapsed under its own weight, armor crumpling inward as if pressed by an invisible hand. The humans moved past them, not even checking for survivors. Their priority was clear. Civilians first. Everywhere, alien survivors watched with a mix of fear and awe. Humans fought with terrifying efficiency, but never abandoned those they were protecting. A wounded alien officer, barely conscious, felt himself lifted onto a stretcher. Through blurred vision, he saw the faceplate of a human medic. "Stay with me," the human said gently, adjusting the field stabilizer. "You're not dying today." Above the atmosphere, the enemy command ship finally understood the scale of their mistake. They broadcast a system-wide emergency plea, not to their allies, but to the Galactic Council itself. "We are engaged with Terran forces," their leader transmitted. "Immediate intervention required." The council chambers erupted. Delegates shouted. Accusations flew. Ancient species demanded restraint, claiming humans had no authority to act beyond their borders. Then a new feed activated. A Terran diplomatic channel. The human ambassador appeared, older, scarred, eyes steady. "You authorized our withdrawal centuries ago," he said calmly. "You erased us from your records. You banned our names from your protocols." His gaze hardened. "But you kept the SOS." Silence fell across the chamber. "You left that door unlocked," the ambassador continued. "Because when things go truly wrong, you still expect us to answer." The feed cut. Back in the war zone, the Terran fleet shifted once more. This time, the energy readings changed completely. They dropped. So low, an analyst whispered. "It's like they're powering down." The enemy fleet surged with false hope. Sensors misread the drop as exhaustion, as limits reached. They attacked again. That was when the humans revealed the truth. The Terran ships had not powered down. They had changed modes. Human vessels disengaged their visible weapon arrays. Hull seams glowed faintly as deeper systems activated. Technologies built not for battlefields, but for endings. A Terran cruiser rotated slowly, aligning itself with the densest cluster of enemy ships. It fired once. Space folded. Not exploded, folded. Enemy vessels vanished into a collapsing pocket of compressed space-time, crushed into a singular point that winked out of existence without sound or light. No debris, no survivors, just absence. Every remaining enemy ship went dead silent. Even their internal channels filled with panic they could no longer hide. The Terran commander finally addressed them directly. "You attacked civilians," she said. "You ignored evacuation corridors. You continued after surrender was offered." Her voice was not angry. It was final. "This engagement will now conclude." Human ships surged forward, faster than before, no longer holding back. The enemy fleet disintegrated under perfectly measured force, disabled, captured, or erased depending on resistance. Within minutes, it was over. The colony system fell quiet for the first time since the attack began. On the command dome, the governor lowered herself into her chair, hands shaking. Around her, officers stared at displays filled with Terran signatures, still present, still overwhelming. The communications officer broke the silence. "They're requesting a status update on civilian casualties," he said. The governor swallowed. "They're checking on us," she whispered. The holomap zoomed out, revealing the full Terran formation, and then it expanded further. Beyond the system's edge, more human fleets waited in dark space, engines cold, weapons silent. Not because they were unnecessary, but because this fleet had been enough. The governor understood then what the galaxy had forgotten. Humanity did not rely on overwhelming force because they loved war. They relied on it so war would not need to happen again. And as the Terran War fleet held position, as survivors emerged into the light, one truth echoed across every channel, every species, every world watching in stunned silence. The Deathworlders had not returned to conquer the galaxy. They had returned to remind it how fragile peace truly was. The battle was over. That fact took time to sink in. Across the system, enemy ships drifted powerless or vanished entirely. Weapons fire had ceased. Emergency beacons blinked weakly from disabled hulls. The stars, once distorted by violence, returned to their natural silence. Yet the Terran War fleet did not relax. Human ships held formation. Drones continued to sweep. Boarding craft launched toward crippled enemy vessels with surgical precision. Every movement followed a plan written long before the first shot was fired. Because for humanity, the end of a battle was not the end of responsibility. Inside the colony command dome, the governor stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, as if the floor itself might give way. "Request medical and engineering assistance," she said. "All sectors." The reply came instantly. "Assistance already en route," the Terran commander responded. "Medical teams deploying. Structural stabilization underway." The governor froze. They had not asked for help again. Humanity had simply assumed it was needed. On the surface, Terran med ships descended through damaged atmosphere layers, engines flaring softly to avoid further harm. Human medics moved through smoke and debris, scanning, treating, lifting, never stopping, never wasting emotion. They treated everyone. Researchers, civilians, even wounded enemy soldiers who no longer posed a threat. That last detail caused unrest. Several alien officers objected, arguing resources should not be spent on attackers. The Terran medic in charge listened patiently, then answered with calm certainty. "We do not decide who deserves to live," she said. "We decide who we can save." No one argued further. Elsewhere, human engineers worked miracles with machines that looked older than the colony itself. Portable frameworks unfolded into temporary supports. Power grids were rerouted through Terran systems without shutting down local infrastructure. They did not rebuild as conquerors. They rebuilt as neighbors who refused to let the house collapse. But for every life saved, there was a cost. A human destroyer still burned in low orbit, hull split open, atmosphere vented into space. Damage control crews worked tirelessly, but the ship's core had been compromised early in the battle. Its captain stood on the bridge, staring at the redoubts. "Evacuate the remaining crew," she ordered quietly. A junior officer hesitated. "We can still." "No," the captain said. "We stay until civilians are clear." Below them, the final evacuation transports launched from the colony. Only when the last signal confirmed safe departure did the captain nod. "Now," she said. Escape pods blasted free seconds before the destroyer's reactor collapsed. The ship folded inward, vanishing in a silent flash. No cheer followed. Across the Terran fleet, the loss was recorded. Names were added to a ledger older than their current civilization. No speeches were made. Humanity mourned efficiently. On the Galactic Council feeds, the reaction was mixed and volatile. Some delegates were openly terrified. Others were furious. A few, very few, were quietly relieved. One counselor slammed a clawed limb against the dais. "This is exactly why humanity was restricted," he shouted. "They operate without oversight, without permission." A reply came before anyone else could speak. The Terran ambassador appeared again. "You had oversight," he said calmly. "You chose comfort instead." The chamber fell into tense silence. "You banned our fleets," the ambassador continued. "You erased our contributions. You told yourselves the galaxy was safer without us." His eyes hardened. "And yet, when extinction knocked on your door, you still used our code." Several delegates looked away. "You do not get to fear the weapon you refuse to maintain," the ambassador said. "And you do not get to complain about the cost when you were not the ones paying it." The feed ended. Back in the system, the Terran commander finally ordered a fleet-wide stand-down from combat posture. Weapons powered down. Formations loosened, but readiness remained. A report came in from ground teams. Enemy resistance was fully neutralized, the officer said. Civilians secured. Casualty counts, still compiling. The Terran commander closed her eyes briefly. Human losses? She asked. A pause. 7 ships destroyed, the officer replied. Multiple damages. Ground units, moderate casualties. Silence filled the bridge. 7 ships. Each one carried hundreds. Each one represented families, histories, futures that would never exist. And yet, none of the humans present questioned the outcome. Because every civilian shelter was intact. Because no evacuation transport had been lost. Because the SOS had been answered fully. On the colony, alien survivors gathered in open plazas and damaged halls, watching Terran ships glide overhead. Some bowed instinctively. Others simply stared. One elderly alien approached a human officer overseeing relief operations. Why? The elder asked. Why come so strongly? Why risk so much for strangers? The human officer considered the question. Because someone once answered our call, he said. And we promised we would do the same. The elder did not understand, but he believed. Deep in the system's shadow, a captured enemy commander was brought aboard a Terran holding vessel. He expected rage, torture, execution. Instead, he was seated, restrained, and presented with a single screen. It showed the colony before the attack. Children, markets, research halls filled with light. Then it showed the aftermath. Scars, ruins. Graves are already being prepared. The human interrogator spoke softly. You will be tired, she said. Publicly. Fairly. The enemy snarled. You should kill me. The human shook her head. No, she said. You will live with what you did. And everyone will know your name. That terrified him more than death ever could. As hours passed, the Terran fleet began to reposition, not to leave, but to stabilize. Patrol patterns were established. Early warning arrays deployed. The message was clear. Humanity was not finished. They were ensuring this never happened again. The governor stood at the viewport, watching a Terran carrier drift past the colony's broken ring. For the first time since the invasion began, she allowed herself to breathe. We are alive, she whispered. Behind her, an aide spoke quietly. Yes, they said, but the galaxy is not the same. She nodded. Somewhere beyond sensor range, in the dark between stars, other species watched and learned. They saw the strength. They saw discipline. But most importantly, they saw the cost humanity was willing to pay and the price they demanded from those who crossed the line. The SOS had saved them, but it had also reminded the universe of a dangerous truth. When humans stepped onto the battlefield, they did not come for glory. They came to finish what others were too afraid to face. And the reckoning was only beginning. The galaxy thought the worst was over. They were wrong. The fighting had ended, but the Terran War fleet did not withdraw. Days passed, then weeks, and human ships remained in orbit, silent and watchful. Patrols moved with clockwork precision. Sensor arrays reached farther than any alien technology could measure. It was not an occupation. It was containment. Inside the rebuilt sections of the colony, life struggled back into motion. Power returned. Water flowed. Children emerged from shelters, staring up at the sky where human warships hung like unmoving stars. Hope returned slowly. Fear did not leave at all, because everyone knew the enemy leaders were still alive. Captured. Secured. Waiting. The Galactic Council demanded custody almost immediately. Formal transmissions flooded Terran channels, wrapped in legal language and ancient authority. These prisoners fall under Council jurisdiction, one message declared. They must be transferred for trial, said another. For the sake of galactic stability, a third insisted. The Terran response was delayed, not because humanity was undecided, but because they were preparing something the galaxy had not seen in centuries. On the flagship, the Terran commander stood before a holodeck showing dozens of star systems connected by glowing lines. Confirm attendance, she said. An officer nodded. All major powers have acknowledged, even those who claimed neutrality. And the broadcast? The commander asked. Open channel, the officer replied. No filters. No edits. The commander nodded once. Good. If this is going to be remembered, she said, it will be remembered clearly. Across the galaxy, screens activated. Civilian networks. Military channels. Council chambers. Private homes and public halls. No one wanted to miss what humanity was about to do. The image that appeared was simple. A vast chamber aboard a Terran vessel. Clean lines. No symbols of conquest. No banners. Just light, steel, and silence. At the center stood the prisoners. Enemy leaders who had ordered the attack. Generals. Political architects. Admirals who had signed the extermination directives. They were alive. Unharmed. Terrified. A human figure stepped forward. Not armored. Not armed. Wearing simple dark clothing. The Terran commander. "This is not a council trial," she began. Her voice carried without amplification. "And it is not revenge." The prisoners sneered. Some laughed nervously. "This is accountability." With a gesture, the chamber changed. Holographic images filled the air, records pulled from enemy systems. Orders issued. Civilian targets marked. Evacuation corridors deliberately blocked. Every decision was displayed. Every signature highlighted. "This broadcast," the commander continued, "is being recorded and archived. Nothing shown here is classified. Nothing is altered." She turned toward the prisoners. "You believed no one would stop you," she said. "You believed the galaxy would argue while your fleets burned worlds." Her gaze hardened. "You were correct." A murmur rippled across alien audiences everywhere. "The only reason you are standing here," the commander said, "is because someone sent an SOS you thought was forbidden." The prisoners began shouting then. Protesting. Claiming ignorance. Claiming necessity. Claiming the usual excuses history had heard 1,000 times. The commander let them speak. Then she raised her hand. Silence fell instantly. "You will each be judged," she said, "not by humans alone." The chamber shifted again. Alien delegates appeared, representatives from the attacked colony, from neighboring systems, from species that had lost ships, trade routes, and lives because of the war. Survivors. Witnesses. Victims. One by one they spoke. A scientist described watching her laboratory vanish with her partner still inside. A transport pilot described escorting refugee ships under fire. A child, barely old enough to speak clearly, described hiding in the dark while the sky burned. The prisoners shrank with every word. This was not a spectacle. This was exposure. When the testimonies ended, the Terran commander spoke again. "You will not be executed," she said. Shock rippled through the galaxy. Several prisoners laughed in relief. The commander's next words erased it. "You will be confined," she said, "for the remainder of your natural lives." The laughter died. "You will not be hidden. You will not be forgotten. Your names, your actions, and your sentences will remain public." She paused. "And every system you ever commanded will know exactly why." One prisoner screamed. Another collapsed. The commander did not react. "This is the human response," she said calmly. "Not annihilation. Not absolution." She looked directly into the camera. Memory. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, reactions exploded. Some species were outraged. They demanded harsher punishment. Others demanded leniency. Many said humanity had no right to conduct such a trial. But far more said nothing at all. They were too busy rewatching the footage. Because for the first time, war crimes had not been buried in treaties or diluted by politics. They had been shown. On the colony world, survivors gathered around public screens. There were tears. There was silence. There was a strange, heavy sense of closure no one had expected. An alien elder spoke quietly. "They did not kill our enemies," he said. "They killed the lie that this was acceptable." Human ships remained for another week. During that time, reconstruction accelerated. Trade routes reopened under Terran escort. Pirate activity vanished overnight. Smugglers avoided the region entirely, not because humans threatened them, but because humans were present. Finally, the Terran war fleet began to move. Ships broke formation and jumped away in organized waves. Patrol grids were handed over to local defense forces, now trained by human advisors. When the last Terran carrier prepared to depart, the governor of the colony requested a final transmission. The Terran commander appeared. "You saved us," the governor said. "We can never repay that." The commander shook her head. "We don't want repayment," she said. "We want fewer calls like this." The governor hesitated. "If it happens again?" The commander's expression hardened, not with anger, but with certainty. "Send the signal," she said. "We will answer." The transmission ended. As the final human ship vanished into hyperspace, the stars felt quieter. But the galaxy did not feel safer. It felt aware. Every power now understood something they had ignored for too long. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. Humanity did not seek worship. Humanity did not want war. But if someone chose to bring extinction to innocent worlds, the Deathworlders would come, not with chaos, not with cruelty, but with judgment, and the galaxy would remember them forever. The Terran War fleet was gone. No farewell ceremony, no declaration of victory, no lingering presence meant to inspire fear. One by one, the human ships folded into hyperspace, leaving behind only quiet stars and a system struggling to understand what had just happened. For the first time since the SOS was sent, the colony slept without alarms. That silence felt unnatural. On the surface, reconstruction continued at a pace no one had thought possible. Human engineers had left behind tools, schematics, and entire fabrication frameworks calibrated for alien hands. Power grids were stronger than before. Defense platforms had been rebuilt with redundancies that no single failure could cripple. Humanity had not just repaired damage. They had future-proofed survival. The governor stood on a balcony overlooking the main habitation ring, watching ships come and go, civilian freighters, medical transports, research vessels returning cautiously to a place that had almost ceased to exist. They didn't take anything, an aide said quietly beside her. The governor nodded. That's what scares me the most. Because empires always took something. Territory, tribute, control. Humanity had taken none of it, which meant their reasons ran deeper than politics. Across the galaxy, the aftershocks spread. Trade coalitions rewrote emergency protocols. Military academies updated entire doctrines overnight. Species that had never spoken the word human aloud began requesting historical briefings they had once voted to suppress. Ancient archives were opened, not by decree, but by necessity, because pretending humans were a myth was no longer possible. On a distant world, a young alien cadet watched recordings of the Terran fleet again and again. He studied formations, timing, discipline. What kind of species fights like that? He asked his instructor. The instructor, old and tired, answered honestly. One that expects to be the last line, she said. The Galactic Council convened in an emergency session. This time, there was no shouting. No one wanted to be the delegate remembered for saying the wrong thing after humanity's return. The chamber lights dimmed as data projections filled the air, losses, saved systems, altered power balances. The truth was impossible to ignore. Without humans, the colony would have fallen. Without humans, the enemy would have expanded. Without humans, the council would have debated until there was nothing left to protect. A senior counselor finally spoke. We need to re-establish contact, he said. Formal relations. Clear boundaries. Another replied, voice tight. They don't want boundaries. They want fewer emergencies. A third counselor leaned forward slowly. Then we should ask ourselves, she said, why emergencies keep happening when humanity is absent. No one answered. Because the answer was uncomfortable. Humanity has not destabilized the galaxy. They had revealed how fragile it already was. Far from council space, in regions rarely charted, human fleets moved quietly. Not in conquest patterns. Not in expansion arcs. They repositioned. Defensive lines adjusted. Old watchpoints reactivated. Systems long considered irrelevant were suddenly guarded with quiet intensity. Humanity has learned something from the SOS. The galaxy was still willing to ignore warning signs until it was too late. That would not be allowed again. On Earth, far from alien eyes, the Terran High Assembly reviewed reports in silence. Losses, gains, outcomes. A name appeared repeatedly in the casualty lists. The destroyer that had stayed behind. The captain who had delayed evacuation. A council member spoke softly. They did what they always do, she said. They stayed. Another nodded. We trained them well. A third shook his head. No, we trained them to survive. They chose the rest. No medals were issued yet. No public statements released. Humanity did not celebrate survival. They mourned the cost. Weeks passed. The colony stabilized fully. Children returned to school. Researchers resumed work, now studying the strange remnants left behind by the enemy's erased technology, and the even stranger signatures of human weapons that bent reality without breaking it. A rumor spread quietly among scientists. Humans had held back, not just tactically, technologically. The idea unsettled them more than the battle itself. If what they had seen was not humanity's full strength, then what was? On a remote station, an alien merchant captain adjusted course slightly, away from a region recently marked by Terran patrol beacons. Better routes exist, his navigator said. The captain shook his head. Not worth the risk, he replied. Risk of what? The navigator asked. The captain did not answer immediately. Of being on the wrong side, he finally said. That sentiment echoed everywhere. Pirate networks dissolved overnight. Illegal arms markets collapsed as suppliers quietly disappeared. Not because humans hunted them, but because no one wanted to test what happened if they did. The fear was not of punishment. It was of interest. One cycle later, a minor border conflict erupted far from the colony system. Two rival powers clashed over resources. Shots were fired. Casualties mounted. The Galactic Council began emergency talks. Before debates could stall, a single message arrived across secure channels. Not a threat, not an order, a reminder. Civilian evacuation corridors are now monitored. No sender was listed. The fighting stopped within hours. For the first time in centuries, a war ended before it could grow. On the recovered colony world, the governor received a private transmission. No encryption, she recognized. No formal header. Just text. You rebuilt well. You protected each other. That matters. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she replied, "Thank you." There was no response. She did not expect one. Because humanity did not linger in gratitude. They moved on. But the galaxy did not. Every species now lives with a new understanding. The SOS was no longer a forbidden relic. It was a promise. If the galaxy failed again, if civilians were targeted, if extinction was chosen, the Deathworlders would hear. And they would come. Not loudly, not proudly, but fully. And next time, the cost might not be paid by humanity alone. As the stars turned slowly and trade lanes reopened, one truth settled deep into galactic consciousness. Peace was no longer protected by treaties or councils. It was protected by the knowledge that somewhere, beyond the charts and the politics, a species existed that would answer the call, even if answering meant bleeding for strangers. And that knowledge changed everything. The galaxy adjusted. It had no choice. In the cycles following the Terran fleet's departure, old habits began to die. Slowly at first, then all at once. Systems that once ignored border skirmishes now intervened early. Trade alliances rewrote clauses that had allowed acceptable losses. Military doctrines quietly removed phrases like collateral margin and strategic civilian displacement. No law forced these changes. Fear did not either. Memory did. Every archive, every public record, every private briefing now carried the same unspoken footnote. This is what happened the last time the SOS was used. On the recovered colony world, a memorial was completed where the first habitat ring had been erased. It was simple. No statues of heroes. No banners of victory. Just names, alien names, human names, etched side by side. Visitors often noticed something strange. The human section was smaller. Not because fewer humans had died, but because many names were listed under a single inscription. Stayed behind. The governor visited the memorial alone on the day it opened. She stood there longer than protocol required, tracing unfamiliar human symbols with her fingers. They chose us, she whispered. No one answered, but she felt the weight of the truth settle anyway. Elsewhere, the Galactic Council convened again, this time not in panic, but in caution. The chamber was quieter than it had been in centuries. Delegates spoke carefully, choosing words that would not echo poorly in future archives. A proposal was introduced. Not a treaty, not an alliance. A recognition. Humanity is to be designated a strategic emergency respondent, one counselor read. Activated only under extreme conditions involving civilian extinction-level threats. The chamber shifted uneasily. Another counselor spoke. They never asked for this. No, the first replied. Which is why it matters that we acknowledge it. The vote passed, not unanimously, but overwhelmingly. For the first time since humanity's withdrawal, their name was restored to official galactic doctrine. Not as rulers, not as enforcers, but as the last call. Far beyond council space, in regions once ruled by predatory empires, the effects were immediate. War plans were shelved. Invasion timetables erased. Generals who had built careers on escalation suddenly found themselves obsolete. One such general stared at a star map in disbelief as his intelligence chief delivered the update. They won't intervene unless civilians are targeted, the chief said. But if we cross that line, the general slammed his fist into the table. We won't, he snapped. And for once, he meant it. In quiet systems, far from the eyes of power, something else happened. Signals began to change. Small things at first. Emergency beacons upgraded. Evacuation protocols practiced seriously instead of ceremonially. Local defense forces trained not just to fight, but to protect. Human influence spread without ships, without soldiers, without presence. It spread through examples. On a remote trade station, an alien dockworker watched a Terran training archive on a public terminal. He replayed a segment showing human soldiers forming a barrier around fleeing civilians, absorbing fire without advancing. Why don't they push? He asked his friend. The friend shrugged. They already won, he said. They're just making sure no one else loses. That idea unsettled him more than any weapon ever could. Meanwhile, humanity watched. Not openly, not loudly. Deep space arrays tracked emerging threats long before councils noticed. Predictive models flagged patterns of behavior, economic pressure, resource hoarding, fleet clustering. When pressure built too far in one region, a quiet message appeared in encrypted diplomatic channels. Evacuation corridors should be prepared. Nothing more. No signature. No explanation. Conflicts dissolved overnight. No one wanted to test whether that message was a warning or a countdown. On Earth, the Terran High Assembly reviewed long-term projections. The data showed a galaxy changing, not because it loved peace, but because it finally understood consequence. A young officer broke the silence. So, did we succeed? She asked. An older commander considered the question. We bought time, he said. That's all anyone ever does. And if the galaxy forgets again? The officer pressed. The commander looked at the casualty ledger still open on the table. Then we'll remind them, he said quietly. Not everyone approved. Within humanity itself, debates stirred. Some questioned the cost. Others feared becoming what the galaxy projected onto them, a looming shadow instead of a people. But whenever doubt grew too loud, someone would replay the SOS recording. The silence before it was answered. The screams before it ended. And the doubt would fade. Because humans remembered why the code existed. In the restored colony world, a child asked her teacher a simple question during a history lesson. Are humans heroes? She asked. The teacher paused. No, she said carefully. They are neighbors who show up when the house is on fire. The child thought about that. Will they come again? She asked. The teacher nodded. If someone lights another fire, she said. Far out in interstellar dark, a signal drifted through space. Not an SOS. Not yet. Just a fragment of noise, a pattern that made human sensors tilt and listen more closely. Threat indicators shifted. Alerts updated. Human fleets did not move. But readiness increased. Somewhere, someone was making a decision they would one day regret. The galaxy did not feel the change yet. But humanity did. Because this was the part that always came before disaster. The quiet where warning signs were ignored, and history waited patiently to repeat itself. And this time, the Deathworlders were already watching. The line had been drawn. Not on a map, not in a treaty, but in memory. And every species now knew what lay beyond it. The only question left was whether anyone would be foolish enough to cross it. Part 8 was coming, and it would decide whether the galaxy had truly learned, or whether humanity would be forced to answer the call one final time. The warning came too late. It always did. At first, it looked like nothing. Just another dispute at the edge of known space. A remote system. Sparse population. Little political value. The kind of place the Galactic Council discussed briefly, then postponed until the next session. Ships massed. Borders tightened. Trade routes quietly closed. Officially, it was called a security operation. Unofficially, everyone knew what it was. A test. The aggressor species believed the lesson had been learned by others, not by them. They convinced themselves the humans were tired, that the cost had been too high, that the Deathworlders would hesitate to answer another call so soon. After all, no SOS had been sent yet. In the threatened world, evacuation orders were issued too slowly. Civilian transports were delayed by bureaucracy, by fear, by the belief that diplomacy would still work. It did not. The first orbital strike hit a population center before the Council finished its opening statements. Cities burned. Millions ran. And finally, desperately, the signal was sent. Not the old code. Not the forbidden one. A new version, rewritten after the last war. Shorter. Clearer. Civilians under attack. Extinction risk imminent. For 13 seconds, nothing happened. Those 13 seconds felt like an eternity. Then, across deep space, human sensors locked on. On Earth, alarms sounded in places the public had never heard of. Long-dormant fleets powered up. Crews ran drills they knew by heart, but hoped they would never need again. The Terran High Assembly convened for exactly 47 seconds. No debate. No vote. Just confirmation. Authorize a full response, the chair said. The answer was unanimous. This time, the Terran War fleet did not arrive in stages. They arrived all at once. Across the endangered system, space tore open in a way no one had ever recorded. Not ripples. Not distortions. A wall. Hyperspace collapsed outward, unfolding into layered formations of human warships so vast that sensors failed to capture the edges. The aggressor fleet froze. Their commanders stared at tactical displays that made no sense. Ship counts kept increasing the more they zoomed out. Energy readings exceeded theoretical limits and then stabilized, as if carefully restrained. The humans did not speak immediately. They did not fire. They let themselves be seen. On the planet below, civilians looked up through smoke-filled skies and saw silhouettes blotting out stars. Hope returned so violently it hurt. The aggressor commanders scrambled to open channels. "This is an internal matter," they transmitted. "You have no jurisdiction." The Terran response cut through every frequency, calm and absolute. "This system is now under human protection." A pause. "You have 3 minutes to power down all weapons and withdraw." Laughter broke out on the aggressor bridge. 3 minutes passed quickly. In 2 minutes, human ships began moving. At 1 minute, gravity wells ignited, locking every hostile vessel in place. At 0, the humans attacked. It was not a battle. It was a correction. Human ships did not focus on destruction first. They targeted command nodes, logistics vessels, and weapon control systems. Entire fleets were rendered blind and mute in seconds. Then the heavy weapons came online. Not the ones used before. New ones. Space bent. Not violently, but deliberately. Enemy ships were pinned in invisible fields, held immobile as Terran forces chose outcomes with terrifying precision. Some vessels were disabled and boarded. Some were forced into controlled retreats. Some, those that continued firing at civilians, were erased completely. On the planet, human ground forces deployed in numbers never before seen. Dropships fell like rain, forming defensive rings around population centers. Human soldiers advanced not to conquer terrain, but to stand still, placing themselves between civilians and annihilation. They absorbed fire. They held lines. They did not retreat. A human commander was asked, mid-battle, why they were committing so many forces to a single world. Her reply was broadcast live. "Because if we allow this to happen again," she said, "then everything we paid before meant nothing." The aggressor leadership realized the truth too late. This was not punishment for the attack. This was prevention of the future. Within hours, the hostile fleets were gone, captured, destroyed, or scattered so completely they would never regroup. Human ships remained. They stabilized the planet's orbit after bombardment damage. They rebuilt power grids under fire. They escorted evacuation convoys personally, refusing to leave until the last civilian transport was clear. Casualties were heavy. Human casualties were heavier. And still, they stayed. When the final hostile signal went dark, the Terran commander addressed the galaxy. Her image filled council chambers, public networks, and private screens across thousands of worlds. "This is the last time," she said. Her voice was steady, but the weight behind it shook civilizations. "The last time we arrive after the first city burns. The last time children die while councils debate wording. The last time you tell yourselves it will not spread." She paused. "We do not want to rule you," she continued. "We do not want your worlds. We do not want your fear." Her gaze hardened. "But we will not watch you fail again." A new protocol appeared across galactic networks, stamped with human authorization and council acknowledgement. Civilian extinction response, active, automatic, immediate, unavoidable. The message was clear. If a species targeted civilians deliberately, humanity would intervene, without waiting for permission. The transmission ended. The galaxy was silent, not in shock, in understanding. On the saved world, survivors gathered in open spaces, watching human ships hold orbit like immovable guardians. Children waved at the sky. Some humans waved back from viewports. A small alien asked a human soldier a question through a translator. Are you going to stay forever? The soldier knelt, meeting the child's eyes. No, he said gently. But we'll come back if you need us. The child nodded, satisfied. Across the stars, aggressor empires dismantled war plans overnight. Generals resigned. Doctrines were rewritten in panic and haste. The age of pretending consequences did not exist was over. Human fleets eventually withdrew, slowly, deliberately, leaving behind reinforced defenses, trained local forces, and something far more powerful than weapons: certainty. On Earth, as casualty lists were finalized and names added to the ever-growing ledger, no celebrations were held. Humanity did not cheer. They stood in silence. Because the galaxy had finally learned what humans had always known. Peace was not maintained by words. It was maintained by those willing to stand between the innocent and destruction, again and again, no matter the cost. And now, the galaxy understood. The SOS was no longer a desperate gamble. It was a guarantee. If the stars burned again, if civilians were hunted, if extinction was chosen, humanity would answer. Not as legends, not as monsters, but as what they had always been. The last line, the shield. And the reason the galaxy survived long enough to learn.